All right, hello everyone and welcome. I know we're getting, looks like we're getting a few participants still joining, so we'll probably kick it off in just another minute or two. But thank you to everyone who has joined. All right, looks like we can go ahead and get started. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Alyssa Tracy, and I'm the Director of the International Trade Program at MEDC. I want to thank you for joining us today to learn about what has become, over the past few months, an increasingly important topic as businesses around the world navigate the new challenges caused by COVID-19 disruptions. Customers are not using traditional routes to buy products, and companies in turn are pivoting to find new ways to get in front of their customers and distributors. Some housekeeping notes before we get started today. All participants will be muted throughout the presentation, but please feel free to post any questions throughout the presentation in the chat, and we'll get to those during and at the end of the presentation today. So don't be shy about asking questions. We're here to help, and make sure that you have a good understanding of IBT offerings in e-commerce and how your company can benefit from that. So our international trade team at MEDC has been supporting companies for years with tools to help expand their global reach, either entering new markets or expanding their reach into markets they've experienced some initial success in. We provide this support with one goal: to help increase companies' export sales. By helping Michigan companies grow their sales in international markets, we support both the company's resiliency and, quite frankly, our state's resiliency. As our international trade team realized that the nature of international trade was changing, we pivoted to. We wanted to ensure that companies are receiving the support they need to meet the challenges of this new environment. And incorporating e-commerce into your sales strategy is one way to approach those challenges head on. Our team now offers 75% reimbursement of costs related to implementing e-commerce solutions to help grow your international sales. That is up to $10,000 per year. So IBT Online will be kicking off our 4-part e-commerce series today, discussing their solutions that companies can tap into in order to grow international sales. As some background, we also partner with IBT Online to provide additional services to help grow company sales and target international markets through website localization, creating a micro version of your website that's both translated and directed to a foreign audience. Today's discussion will focus primarily on e-commerce solutions, though, that IBT offers. And without further ado, I'll kick it off to Andrew Lawler, who leads IBT's operations in Michigan, and Samantha is also joined to contribute to the programming. So thank you so much, Andrew, and I'll let you take it away.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. I appreciate that introduction. My name is Andrew, and today we're going to be talking more about e-commerce, and the focus is to leverage today's e-commerce programs to continually grow your business with the focus on growing your exports, your sales, your brand, and your business online and globally. And the best way to kick things off here is to just give a brief introduction. My name is Andrew Lawler. As Alyssa said, I'm the business development manager for Michigan. I'm currently located in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Despite these Cubs and Bears flags and posters that I have behind me, I am in Grand Rapids and joined by Alyssa Tracy, the Director of International Trade at the MEDC, and my colleague who will be speaking in a little bit here, Samantha Safici. She's a Senior Business Development Manager here at IBT as well, and she's located down in Miami, Florida. To give a brief introduction, first off, on IBT Online, we're here to help Michigan exporters go global, make sure that you're continuing to grow your export sales brand and your business. Just before I dive into this chart here with many of the different facts and numbers that you see, I just wanted to preface by saying that we were lucky enough to be given the opportunity to apply and get awarded with the President's E Award for expert service. So this is the highest recognition that any U.S. company can receive for making a significant contribution to the expansion of U.S. exports. And just to say that IBT Online has been around for quite a long time. It was a company started in 2002. We've been around for about 18 years. We work with about 22 other U.S. state programs alongside MEDC as being one of our main state programs that we work with that we love. We work with 24 different languages, 40 countries, 65 target markets, have over 500 satisfied clients. We have 600 free resources on our website, whether there's blogs, webinars, infographics, talking about online environments. We've completed about 1,500 online global programs, being a website in China, a website in Mexico, a social media program in Germany, for example. And then below, just to say that we have a couple different awards, and also we take our feedback for Michigan exporters very seriously. And just to start off with a quick agenda of what we're going to be covering today, we have about 5 points that we want to get across. And I know Samantha's going to be taking away with point number 1. We're going to be starting with the international buyer and their localized journey, then diving into the global e-commerce landscape, looking at international e-commerce choices for exporters, looking at e-commerce best practice, and also some of the Michigan online global programs, and then ended off with some action points, showing you some resources, give some takeaways, and of course, open it up to any questions. And so with that, I'd like to pass it over to Samantha to talk more about the international buyer and their localized journey.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Andrew. So hey there, everyone. Thank you so much for letting me join in on this webinar. But before we dive into the nuts and bolts of why e-commerce and how to do it internationally, I think it's really important that we start with defining your ideal corporate persona, as well as your buyer persona. So the first step is identifying and defining your ideal corporate profile. Your ideal corporate profile is your ideal client or customer or user. And you need to define it as something like a big corporation, a small mom and pop shop company, an OEM, a direct consumer, all of those attributes that help you define your ideal corporate customer. But then a buyer persona is not the same as an ideal customer profile. You need to go a little bit deeper into subcategories. So for example, let's say your company is a B2B company, and it's in advanced manufacturing. So one of your buyer personas can be the CEO, but who makes the ultimate decision, but they are in the end going to be talking to multiple other sort of buyer personas. So that can include his engineer, maybe head of sales and marketing, maybe a research analyst, all of which have their own set of challenges, pain points, and needs that you're going to have to address. So your buyer persona will define the people in the companies that you need to work with to connect and engage with about the challenges about how your business can help them. And each buyer persona will have specific questions, concerns, and roles within your ideal corporate profile. So taking a look at this in practice, we have an example here called Zipcar. And Zipcar knows their buyer persona so well that they actually include it in their mission statement. So they're looking for somebody who's urban, educated, tech savvy, and environmentally conscious. And you can see by their communication policy, so in this example, we have an Instagram post, that they are absolutely talking to that buyer persona. So here in this post, you can see that it's a picture of 2 young urban people that look environmentally conscious because they're holding plants. And they look like they're in an urban environment based on their background. And Zipcar actually goes a step further in using the appropriate hashtags like hashtag back to school, hashtag plants, hashtag dorm life. But identifying your domestic buyer persona is just one piece of the puzzle. You need to understand that internationally, your buyer personas might look a little bit different. So, and especially in times like today, your international buyer persona will have different questions and different ways of interacting with you. So here we have a few questions that you can ask yourself when starting to identify those buyer personas that you're going to try to sell to. So, for example, do I have multiple buyer personas in my export markets? How do they find me? What do they care about? What are their concerns? How are their concerns different from my domestic buyer persona? How do they like to buy from me? What do they want from me? All of these questions that you can ask yourself regarding your international buyer personas. And just to show you guys as an example, here we have L'Oreal, who is frequently cited for how spot on their international marketing is. And here is a snapshot of their website towards the beginning of the pandemic, when people were shutting down. They weren't going to their salons as much. They weren't getting their hair done. So L'Oreal was reaching out to their US buyer persona, their stylists, their hair salon owners, and just saying, hey, we're here for you. We understand this is a hard time, but L'Oreal's here. However, if you look at the Australian snapshot at the same time, you will see no mention of COVID-19, coronavirus, social distancing, nothing. Instead, you'll see a really big focus on the climate. And this is probably because of those horrible fires that Australia suffered through in the beginning of January. So they knew that their buyer persona in Australia cared about the environment and the climate. And that's what they focused on their website as well. And then in the last example, you'll see that L'Oreal is demonstrating to their Brazilian customers that they're doing their part to help the people of Brazil by producing hand sanitizer, which is something that they don't normally produce. So each buyer persona is clearly different, and their messaging is respectful of that. So moving on to what your buyer persona's priorities are today, and in this case, what your priorities are today. So first, it's looking after employees. Second is looking after and managing costs, maintaining supply chains and existing partnerships, and then generating sales, exports, and business. And today we're here to talk about that last piece, about how to do that online through your website and through your international online marketing with like a really nice focus on e-commerce and how that kind of all ties together. So to get a really good understanding as to how we can do that, we want to talk about the online world. So as of October 2020, more than 4.6 billion people across the globe were on the internet, which is about 60% of the world's population. And actually another over 300 million have joined since October of last year. So about the same, very similar to the population of the United States came on last year, which is pretty impressive. And when we analyze the number of people online and their behavior, I want to draw your attention to the average time spent online, which is a little less than 7 hours a day. And that's just an average. And so if there's one thing that you can take away from this slide, is that across the globe, your customers, your prospects, your leads, future distributors, future employees, suppliers, everyone that your business interacts with is online, and they're spending more time online than ever. And what they're doing online is communicating with each other. And again, COVID-19 has massively increased that with remote working and people communicating across the globe through the internet. And but even before the shift, over 43% of internet users were using social media for work purposes, and they were spending about 2.5 hours a day on social media. So that's a pretty nice chunk. And if you look at the numbers, just the numbers on the slide, over 453 million people became active social media users, meaning they log on pretty frequently. It's not like, somebody's grandma that logs on once a year to look at pictures. These are active users that have come online since October of 2019. So that's huge. And actually, COVID-19 has made it even more relevant. We've seen an article through the Financial Times on LinkedIn, and it was just saying that companies around the globe have been posting more and more on LinkedIn so that they can stay top of mind of their suppliers, distributors, customers, potential customers, so that when things kind of return to normal, they're still on people's minds and they're still present. And the numbers absolutely back it up. LinkedIn shared that the number of conversations between its members jumped 55% in March from the same time last year. and live broadcasts like this have gone into absolute overdrive. Demand has more than tripled since February, and users are much more chatty on these broadcasts, with the number of comments and likes surging 272%. So all of these numbers are really good news for you guys. It's really good news for companies and exporters, because you know exactly where your clients and prospects are and what they're doing. They are all online and they're all on social media. So you can absolutely use this both for your domestic business as well as your international. And in an ideal world, this is what your online presence would look like. So this is kind of showing like different ways that you can sell online and kind of interconnect your websites. So your US domestic market e-commerce website, it can be e-commerce enabled or not, whatever works best for your business and your strategy. It will have its own communication policy surrounding it. So it'll have SEO and social media marketing kind of driving traffic to your e-commerce enabled site or just your informational website, driving leads, driving traffic to it. And through that website, you can have links to your Amazon account. So if somebody wants to purchase, but you don't have it e-commerce enabled, but you can link it to your Amazon platform, that is absolutely welcome and something that we see pretty often. But your international clients and prospects should have a very similar environment for them. So say in this example, you are selling into Brazil and France. So each market will have their own dedicated website, whether it's e-commerce enabled or not, either way, localized for that market. And it'll also have a communication strategy surrounding it. So it'll have its own SEO and social media working for that market to drive leads to that localized website. And those websites can also have links to something like a Mercado Libre in South America, or an Amazon.fr for France. So you can sell that way as well. But the communication policy will be localized for each market, and they will all be interconnected. So your French and your Brazilian site will look very similar. It'll have a very similar look and feel to your US website. So as a takeaway, and you'll hear this a couple more times throughout this presentation, make sure you have a localized website to support your e-commerce and your online marketing strategies. And the reason for this is because of how search engines work. Search engines, and here we're using Google, but the same applies to others like Yandex, Bing, Baidu, and even things these days like YouTube, Amazon, Facebook. They all are kind of used as search engines to a certain degree. They're all searcher centric, so they all put the searcher in the middle. And Google itself has 192 regional or country specific search engines. So if you have just a couple of pages that are translated and put on your website that aren't highly relevant to your target audience or your buyer persona, you will pretty much be invisible to the people in that market. And here is a really great practical example of that. So, and how Google can produce results that are relevant to each specific user and where they're at. So Susanna, who's in the UK, and maybe somebody that you guys know pretty well from other webinars that we've done at IBT Online, and myself in Miami, we both have dogs that love to play in the background whenever we have a webinar. So we both searched for squeakless dog toys. And logically, Google came up with results that were really relevant to each user. So I got things that I'm really familiar with, like Chewy.com, Amazon.com, and even Yahoo came up with a relevant piece of content for me. However, Susanna got things I've never heard of and wouldn't be relevant to me. For example, barksandbunnies.co.uk, timeforpause.co.uk, and even Amazon was localized with amazon.co.uk. So the same search on different Google search engines gave us different results. And that's pretty much the basis of why we're talking about e-commerce strategy the way that we are in this presentation. So why do Michigan exporters need localized e-commerce and online business development tools? It's because the world is online. And if you want to communicate with your international prospects or distributors or whoever you're trying to reach out to your international buyer persona, you need to have some sort of localized presence, whether it's e-commerce enabled or not, so that you can be easily found, be understood, and be easier to do business with in your target markets. And with that, I hand over to Andrew.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Samantha. I appreciate you giving and laying the foundation for why it is so important to have an online presence, especially internationally. And now, as we move forward, we can then jump into the e-commerce landscape and what that looks like globally. So first things first, when you look at this map here, you really get a sense of how big e-commerce really is. I mean, you look at the number $3.5 trillion, and that's globally. And then when you look at the total population of the world, it's about 7.5 billion people. Now, 4.5 billion people are online, and about 3.5 billion are shopping online. So that means about 45% of the world population is buying products online, and it's only going to be increasing. Just as an example, at the start of this year, Amazon sported a valuation of about $920 billion, and now to where it's at 1.5 trillion. So that means that their stock has increased by more than 60% just this year alone. This is supported by the increase of consumer spending on Amazon, which is between the months of May and July, and that was about 60% increase from the same time frame last year. Not only that, but another platform that we'll be looking at a little bit later, Shopify. They also share that their gross merchandise volume, which is the measure of their consumers' total spend through their own network of stores, rose about 119% year on year in the second quarter alone. And they're about $30 billion. So just to say that this is absolutely a global phenomenon. And then, based on the last slide, we already know that China and the US have huge e-commerce markets that are worth about $740 billion and $560 billion by themselves. But just keep in mind that Europe is also just as big. If you take the region as a whole, it's just about the same size as the US. And then here on the screen, we're going to be showing you a snapshot of e-commerce adoption worldwide, with an average of about 75% of internet users saying that they bought something online in the last month. Now, what I find interesting in this graph is that the countries that have greater penetration of e-commerce than the United States, who aren't necessarily in the top 10 of B2C Global Ecommerce. These numbers show, Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, Poland, Ireland, just to say that e-commerce is being adopted worldwide. And it's not just the main markets that you think of, like Canada, Mexico, China. It's projected to grow even more than what we see here too. And as we go into the e-commerce activity, we just want to take a quick look at some of the different types of e-commerce activities and some of the habits that you'll see online. And just to point out a couple of these statistics here, you see that 82% of internet browsers have gone searched online for something to buy, and that's why SEO is so critical. For example, 52% of those that have made purchases on a mobile device, which is why having an e-commerce or a localized website that's mobile friendly is also very important. And also, there's something on here that's not included on the slide that we think is also just as important, is the number that 57% of consumers have purchased goods from another country at some point. And this is why that local user experience on your website or your storefront needs to be a priority, regardless of which platform you're using, e-commerce or otherwise. Now we're going to be switching into the importance of social media, creating a social media strategy, and ultimately this is the one-to-one medium which gives your company the chance to market in a direct but a very human way. There's a couple key points that I want to make on the importance of social media and how it impacts your international efforts by expanding your marketing efforts, so that the content is going to be seen by a wide audience and hopefully the correct audience. The second point being, it's here to continually grow your brand awareness. So, as Samantha said, gone are the days when you're only able to build that awareness through billboards or magazines or television ads. But with social media, you now have the ability to bring that brand content directly to the customers, to your partners, to your prospects, and just find them where your audience is already located. Social media is one of the most powerful ways to connect with your audiences. A company by the name of Sprout Social, they reported that when consumers follow a brand on social, about 67% of consumers are more likely to spend more with that brand. And 78% say that they will visit that brand's physical retail store. So this is especially true between millennials, saying that about 84% are more likely to buy from a brand that they follow on a social media compared to a brand that they don't follow on social media. So social media is here to help you attract buyers to your website, to your products, to your services, and it gives you the ability to have a direct conversation with them in the place of their choosing. Now, looking at the B2B e-commerce landscape, just to say that, there's many people that think that e-commerce is just selling to individual consumers in a very B2C way, in their homes, when they're in their homes, and that many people are surprised when they see that there is a huge prevalence in the B2B e-commerce market and for transactions. It's very challenging to get the consistent data, but by all measurements, the B2B e-commerce market is massive. There's another company by the name of Statista, big in statistics and providing factual information. They estimated that the global B2B e-commerce market is valued at about $10.5 trillion, and that was in 2019. And just for reference, that's about 3.5 times the size of what the B2C market is. But just to say, remember that whether it's B2C or B2B, you're still going to be communicating and engaging with a person at the other end. And so what this means is that even if your B2B product or your service is a high price point and it's very customized and tipped and tailored, you have to take a consultative sales approach to your website. It has to be compelling. It has to encourage the CTAs on the website. And it has to convince the customer to request contact because he's already doing his research online. Whether you're selling your product or your service through B2B or B2C, the influence of smart website development and strategic online marketing are critical. As you can see here, when people are researching a brand, over 50% of them use search engines as their primary source of information, with social networks coming in as a close second, with about 43%. And now to speak on some of the, just another graph here, just to say on this side, a couple of statistics, 94% of B2B purchases are researched online before they even make contact with a sales representative or even reach out to that distributor. Or 74% of B2B buyers are purchasing, half online. So just to say, now we're going to pass it over to Samantha to cover the international e-commerce options for exporters.
Excellent. Thanks, Andrew. So now that you guys have an idea as to the landscape, what e-commerce is kind of looking like these days, I want to go over what the options are. And I know you've heard from other providers like Amazon and I think Alibaba. So we have a way that you can combine those with a localized website. So options for e-commerce, the way that we see it is that you have 3 different options. The first one is owning your own localized website for your international markets, and then link it to specific marketplaces and in-market distributors. The second one is to have your own e-commerce platform, so a fully functional e-commerce platform in your target markets. And the third is a combination of the marketplace and your own. And we'll be going over all of these in detail. So the first one is your own localized website plus a generalist marketplace. So there are 3 e-commerce giants, Amazon, Alibaba, and Rakuten, who are built on very different business models. But it's important to keep in mind that there are also some really important local leaders that we have some pretty cool graphs afterwards, kind of like Zalando in Germany or Mercado Libre in pretty much all of Latin America. Some of the differences are who manages the shopping and payments versus logistics, inventory, and customer service. But it's important to consider the generalist marketplaces for your export markets. You really want to understand where your buyer persona is and where they're buying from, and be able to allocate those resources accordingly. The other option is specialist marketplaces and in-market distributors. And this is probably the most common choice for B2B companies, because it lets your distributor do some of the work for you as well. So for what we've seen is companies having a localized website in markets. So we can say one in German for Germany, and then another one in Brazil, in Portuguese for Brazil. And say that company has distributors in those places. So they'll have their own localized website, and they will link it to the appropriate distributors. So when somebody goes on the website and they want to make a purchase, they can be transferred over to the distributor site, and then the distributor will make the end sale. So having a localized website wouldn't compete with your distributor or with a specialist marketplace, but instead it'll just drive additional traffic and additional customers to their websites to be able to make the final purchase. This is a great solution. Oh, sorry, Andrew, one back. This is a great solution if you're starting in a new market, or if you have a really great relationship with your distributor. But just know that distribution platforms can carry some risks, because they are taking ownership of your brand. They control where your products are sitting next to, how they're being marketed, and you have some level of control. But in the end, they're the ones who control their own website. So description, display, and distribution can all kind of have a negative effect if you don't offset it with a localized website. So that's why we always say to have a localized website and then connect it appropriately with your distributor or the marketplaces. And here we've listed the top 20 online marketplaces worldwide. Globally, more than 50% of e-commerce sales were made through online marketplaces, contributing 1.7 trillion to the economy last year. And it's no surprise that Amazon and eBay are in the top 3, with Amazon pulling nearly 6 billion visits per month and eBay getting 1.6 billion. And we've all heard about the phenomenal growth since COVID. But what about the number 2 worldwide? How many of you have ever purchased or shopped at PayPay? Japan's PayPay Mall is the second on the list, which may come to a surprise to the many Westerners who have never heard of it before. And these are the only marketplaces that break the 1 billion per visits mark. Although Mercado Libre, AliExpress, and Rakuten aren't too far behind, with about 600 million visits per month each. And in the top 20, it's pretty interesting because there's a 50-50 split between marketplaces and retailers themselves, and those that are only marketplaces. So the best known retailer with their own marketplace is Amazon, with over 50% of sales now being made by marketplace sellers. Excuse me, but it also includes companies like Walmart, JD.com, and Target. And these companies have added marketplaces to their existing retail sites, giving shoppers greater product choice and creating a little bit of competition between sellers. And then when it comes to geographic regions, there's a really diverse mix represented in the top 20. 6 are global brands, but there's also marketplaces from Japan, South America, China, North America, Southeast Asia, India, and Europe, all represented in the top 20. So a lot of shopping going on. And then in this next slide, you'll be able to see, we'll just real quick go through these, some regional marketplaces. And it's just nice to see that each region has their own marketplaces that are doing really well there. So the US, things that we're really familiar with, everything from Amazon to Best Buy to Target, Walmart, Etsy. But if you look in the next slide, here we have South America. So Mercado Libre with coming almost 600 million visits per month. And then nothing else that's really, really familiar other than Wish. Europe, Amazon, eBay, but then there's others that are very, very specific, like bol.com for Netherlands, Ozone for Russia, Otto for Germany. Then we have, I think, Asia. Yes, Southeast Asia with Shopee coming in at #1, and Amazon coming in at #9 with only 3 million visits per month. And then, of course, China being its own very unique environment. Taobao has almost 455.1 million visits per month, and kind of unheard of, but Amazon also dropping pretty far below with only 100,000 million per month. So as you can see here, each area has their own marketplaces that their own buyer personas like to go to shop. So if you're thinking about going the marketplace route just because they're, it can be helpful in logistics and pricing and currency and all of that stuff, keep in mind that each place has specific marketplaces. And then there's the other option. So the second option of having your own e-commerce platform. And there are so many out there, just like there's so many regional marketplaces and generalist marketplaces. There's also a ton of e-commerce platforms that you can use to create your own international website. So there's a lot to choose from, and different businesses have different needs, but there are a few non-negotiables, especially if you're looking to go international, that you absolutely need to take into consideration if building your own e-commerce platform. And those are listed here. So mobile responsive design. So if somebody pulls it up on a cell phone or on a huge desktop, but mostly cell phone because this is mobile, everything is fit to screen, and they have a really pleasant user experience with very little friction so that they can actually make the purchase. Simple user interface, so great local user experience, conversion oriented user experience, complete tech stack, automation, reporting, so you want to be able to understand what's happening with your platform and be able to adjust accordingly. And here there's just a few of these. I think these are the top 10 e-commerce platforms that people like. But on the next slide, there's information about the top 4. So just kind of diving into each one individually, because I know this is something that a lot of people have a lot of questions about. So the first one is about Shopify. So Shopify was started in 2004 by, fun fact, a group of snowboarding enthusiasts. They were fanatics. Shopify is now leading e-commerce solution in the market with over 1 million businesses across 175 countries. And Shopify's retailers cover a ton of different sizes and industries. So we found that Shopify is best for, it's one of the best e-commerce platforms for beginners to small to medium-sized companies that need their hands held a little bit when creating and setting up their store. Everything you need is already integrated in the platform, and we found that the price ranges from $29 to $299 per month, depending on what package you purchase. So just plain Shopify is not so good for international, but when you get into Shopify Plus, there is an upgraded version for kind of like the enterprise level businesses. And in addition to the e-commerce platform itself, Shopify Plus offers additional services and businesses that benefits more for the large and multinational companies. And for Shopify Plus, it starts at $2,000 a month, but it's fully dependent on the option selected. And we found that Shopify Plus has a lot more international options than just plain Shopify. The second largest is BigCommerce, and BigCommerce was founded in 2009 by 2 Australians, and it's now headquartered in Austin, Texas, with 600 employees and just growing. And they have offices all over the world. To date, the customer has helped online retailers do $25 billion worth of sales across 120 countries, so pretty impressive. We found that BigCommerce is best for small to medium-sized businesses who require a lot from their online retailer and have pretty deep pockets to invest in the plugins and the add-ons. Its base tier is loaded with features, but priced higher than many of its competitors. Advanced features like BigCommerce's abandoned cart and shipping integrations are some of the best in the industry, but are not available at the lower tiers. Instead of charging a fee per transaction, BigCommerce caps the amount of sales that you can do per tier. So I have here listed a couple of the tiers. So the standard is almost $30 a month with a max of $50,000 of annual sales. BigCommerce Plus is $80 a month with $180,000 of cap of sales. BigCommerce Pro is $299 a month and 400,000 cap of annual sales. So depending on how big your e-commerce platform is going to be internationally, you can kind of adjust. And what's nice about BigCommerce is that it does have international options that jive really well. Magento. So Magento is number 3, and it's one of the most popular open source e-commerce platforms in the world. It was originally released in 2009 and then replaced with 2.0 in 2015 that I know from experience gave a lot of companies headaches. But it had improved code and it's improved its usability and stability features, so that was great. So Magento is best for small to medium businesses, again, that have already established some sort of demand in those markets. But you also need the time, the manpower, the skill to be able to build the e-commerce platform. So there's not a whole lot of hand-holding if you're going to use Magento. It's very powerful with a library of over 5,000 extensions, but it requires a longer development time and a larger budget than most of its competitors. So prices in Magento are divided into 2 tiers. Magento open source is free to download. However, you pretty much have to pay for everything that's extra, like hosting and themes and development and add-ons, etc., etc., etc. So it's not like just like a base price or an all-inclusive price rather. Magento Commerce is the enterprise level solution, and those are quoted by a sales rep and are reported to run anywhere from $15,000 to $50,000 annually. But it also has a ton of e-commerce international options. So we love Magento. We use it pretty frequently. And then there's WooCommerce. So WooCommerce is free. It's open source. It's a shopping cart plugin owned and developed by WordPress. So something that we use really often. It's one of the most popular e-commerce options on the market and runs about 30% of stores on the internet. So they have a pretty decent market share. And we found that WooCommerce is best for small businesses that already have a site on WordPress, who operate on a tight budget but still want a robust online store. It has thousands of third-party themes and plugins, and it gives you a really great deal of flexibility to accommodate for most of your needs. The price of this is something that I think a lot of people will like because it is free to download with extensions and add-ons. And there are international options available through extensions. And like most open source e-commerce platforms, WooCommerce carries a pretty steep learning curve for those who have not created a similar site before. Although the WooCommerce plugin is pretty straightforward to set up and install, you kind of have to use you have to develop your own expertise using community forums and online help guides. Once you're up to speed, though, it becomes much easier to customize and operate. And these are just the top 4, but there are others that you saw on the other slide, like Squarespace, Wix, etc. And then the last option for kind of like your e-commerce strategy is a combination of everything that I spoke about. So you can have your localized website for your company. So a localized website for, let's say, France. And then it can be connected to a generalist marketplace. It can be connected to a distributor. You can have your own e-commerce platform. What's nice about this is that you don't have to have one policy for all of your international markets. It can be completely dependent on your buyer persona and how they want to purchase from you, how they want to interact with you. So in France, you can be connected to Amazon, and then in South Africa, you can have your own e-commerce platform. Thailand, you can connect it to a distributor. So totally depends on your company and what suits your international goals best. But so then in summary, there is a case for a localized website to accompany your international e-commerce, because without a localized website, if you're just setting your website or setting up your products and services on things like Amazon or a distributor site or a specialist marketplace, you have limited brand development, you have limited marketing control because it's essentially a search engine. So you're right next to your competition, and the only thing differentiating you guys are things like reviews or if you paid ad spend. So you don't have too much control over it. There's little product differentiation. There's ongoing fees and commissions. So depending on what marketplace you use, there are always some sort of commission or fees that you have to pay to be able to be on the platform. And there's other costs, and depending on which platform you go to and where you're going to, for example, China, there are some platforms there that you need QR codes. You need to do marketing on their website to be able to even participate in it. So just be aware that there are those hidden costs in some of these platforms. Platform audience, without a localized website, you don't have too much control over how you're doing any sort of outreach to them. And then conflicts of interest. So like I mentioned before, your product can be right next to your competitor and you have no control over that. However, if you have a localized website, then you have control over all of those things that are on the negative side. So you can have control over your brand messaging. You can have control over how you're reaching out to your audience, how your brand is being portrayed, how your product is being sold. And you can still connect it to your marketplace. So you'll have all the benefits of the marketplace, plus the benefits of owning your own brand and being in control of the messaging, which is absolutely key nowadays with so much competition online. And with that, I'll pass back to Andrew to go over some of the examples. Andrew.
Wonderful. Thank you, Samantha. I appreciate the summary at the end there. That was fantastic. I just want to dive into, and being wary of time, I just want to quickly go through some of the examples that we've seen, and not only the website localization atmosphere, e-commerce, international online marketing, and of course, speak just a little bit about the Michigan Online Global Programs as well. So this first slide here is all about the Michigan Online Global Programs, that they're ultimately here to help your company and the internet work for you globally. And just to point out a couple of these check marks and objectives here on the side, these are things that we've been able to help other clients with through these programs, whether they're trying to reach new international markets, they are in a B2B format, trying to reach out to distributors, support them, or maybe even recruit more distributors. Having consumer influence, having leadership and engagement in the B2C atmosphere, growing your brand awareness, your credibility, your trust, and also measuring and managing your online success, just to name a few. But just to say that these are all important things that we take in mind when going through the Michigan Online Global Programs. And on the next slide actually talks about some of the first two options that we have as a part of the Michigan Online Global Programs and in partnership with the MEDC. So what we see here are two options that are surrounded by and supported by website localization. So just a couple key things to point out on this slide. We have option A, which is talking about 2 best practice, country-specific and optimally localized business development websites, and they're for your top 2 international markets. Whereas option B is going to be the same thing basically, and creating those business development websites for you, whether you're just trying to go into 1 market, whether you're trying to go into 5 markets. This is where we have the ability to work well with your company and define the scope of work that you're looking for that's best for your target audience. At the very bottom, and I know all the programs will say that there are STEP grants available for these Michigan Online Global Programs. as well. And as Samantha said, just to go through some of the examples as well, here we have Palladio Beauty, who's a company down in Florida, and they have a few key points of some of the things and some of the objectives that they've been able to accomplish with their localized websites. They went local in the US, Mexico, and in Saudi Arabia. As you can see, some of the other sites, here's the Saudi Arabian site. And ultimately, they're just trying to, keep that brand identity the same across those different international markets. They use SEO and the keyword research to make it more localized and make sure that it's on trend with anything going on in the beauty industry, for example. And the last slide here just shows an example of their website built for the Mexican market. So in Mexican Spanish for that market, as you can see, the brand identity stays the same. So people know that they are a legitimate business and localized for other markets. This is also a good way that they're able to control that brand image, control their consistency, help their in-market partners, and also help out with that brand control of the consumer market. This next slide is just talking about the opportunity to communicate with the local e-commerce and buyer persona. So what I really want to highlight is the importance of some of the quotes on the slide and the importance of social media in e-commerce. I mean, for example, there's about 40% of the Middle East consumers that are on social media that buy products. Or the next line there talking about how intertwined social media is in the everyday lives of consumers and also businesses all across Latin America. This is a trend that's seeing a really strong growth across the globe as consumers or businesses turn to online solutions to drive their international sales. So just to say, e-commerce is everywhere. It's a very competitive place, and it's not just for B2C, but it's also really competitive for B2B companies as well. And it's also just as engaging with your buyer persona and differentiating the factor for the success you have in those countries. This second slide and talking to round out the Michigan Online Global Programs, we have option C for international online marketing, and then also option E, which has been our emphasis today on e-commerce. So just to say some of the important facts on here, what are the benefits of international online marketing? Ultimately, it's going to be using social media marketing, search engine marketing, reporting, looking at the analytics to continually drive traffic, conversions, drive engagement back to the websites, back to your e-commerce platforms, and own that brand identity. As for the e-commerce programs, it's going to be using things like Shopify or WooCommerce or BigCommerce, some of these platforms that Samantha had spoke about, and building you an e-commerce best practice, accompany localized business development website that have all of your needs and have all of your objectives into consideration. And at the bottom, as it did for the first slide, there are step grants that are available for these programs specifically. And just to highlight, there's two last client success stories that I wanted to point out. We have one with Progral, who went global in China and in the UK. They have a great quote here, and they said it best: "The world is changing. It's online. It's going to be changing, and staying online for quite a long time." For Progral, we did a lot of social media outreach along with their websites. So we created localized marketing campaigns through their social media, through their SEO. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it increased their sales, their brand recognition. They generated a ton of leads for their in-market distributors, and ultimately grew the business within those top markets. And then a quick video on that as well there. And we also have another client here, VaporPen, who built e-commerce websites for some of the markets in Portuguese-speaking Brazil, Spanish-speaking Latin America, also went to English-speaking Australia and New Zealand, and built those e-commerce platforms through and also worked through the social media and SEO as well. Again, here to increase their sales, their brand recognitions, and the growth in those markets as well. And a couple examples of what we've been able to localize in these different markets for them as well. And lastly, to finish things off, I want to pass it back to Samantha to do action points, takeaways, and talk a little about the key of Q&A.
Excellent. Thank you. So I'm just going to rush through these because I realize that we only have 5 minutes. So in the end, why do Michigan exporters need business development tools? You need them because the world is online. The world is shopping online. So you want to be where your buyer persona is, or where they are. So by having a localized website or e-commerce platform or being on marketplaces, it'll help you be found, be understood, and be easier to do business with. So then in the next slide, international e-commerce success is localization plus preparation. So really making sure that you have your backend stuff in line before doing any sort of e-commerce, really understanding your buyer persona and the buyer's journey. So everything that I talked about in that section of how they want to purchase from you, what they want from you, how do they interact. That's all really important when considering how you're going to sell to your international prospects. Choosing the right e-commerce model, what is right for you in that specific market for your industry, and then using localized websites and online marketing to be found, be understood, and be trusted enough to do business with. And this is just to say that we do have those Michigan online global programs that that Andrew was talking about. So please don't hesitate to get in touch. Andrew is your main point of contact with his contact information on the last slide. But we will be able to create this localized presence for you, whatever your goals are, whether it's to help you recruit distributors or support distributors or build trust and credibility in the market or build a full-on e-commerce platform. We are absolutely there for you to be your digital international online partner. And we do have a e-commerce handout available on our website that's free. So if you go to our website and go to our infographics, you can download it there. And now we have 3 minutes for questions. So sorry.
Oh, you did great. Thank you so much, Samantha and Andrew. I really appreciate your comprehensive overview of the e-commerce solutions that IBT offers and why it's so important for companies to be in e-commerce right now. So just for the audience, as a reminder, you can type some questions into the chat. But I did have a question to kick us off with just the remaining that we have. What is the best way to deal with multiple currencies on your e-commerce website if you're bringing that into your own website?
I can take
So
it. Yeah, so depending on which e-commerce platform you choose, there are certain plugins that can help you with currency fluctuations and that sort of thing. You can also set a price so that it doesn't really fluctuate. It's totally up to the company and what they're hoping to do in that market. But there are plugins for that.
Awesome, thank you. And one last question, we have some others typing into the chat. Can you convert your localized website to an e-commerce enabled website later on down the line?
Yeah, I can take that one. And so like just the question was, can you convert that localized website that you have that doesn't have the e-commerce plugins into that e-commerce platform internationally and to be localized? And the answer is yes. There are many ways. There's many different platforms that you can use. And as Samantha had noted before, whether you're looking at Shopify, or maybe potentially you have a WordPress website where WooCommerce is very easily adaptable. You're able to use WooCommerce then to transition off and build that platform. And for them, it's a free plugin, obviously with other prices for other add-ins and other plugins, but there are many ways that you can take your current localized site and adapt that for e-commerce.
Thank you. And I did know you did have a question that just came through in the chat. The company is already working on MEDC, and they're a sheet plant and corrugated manufacturer. So they wanted to know what other, kinds of can help them transition the site from Shopify that is more e-commerce focused for a company that is more industrial.
Yeah, I can take that one if you want. Yes, we can absolutely help you with that. That's actually an interesting problem because it's usually the other way around. So, but we absolutely create localized websites or websites for the US market that are not e-commerce enabled, not Shopify, but very B2B focused, very informational. It can we can have the appropriate calls to actions and landing pages if you have a more kind of consultative approach or something that's very very tailored, and that's something that we have a lot of experience in.
Fantastic. So the participant from Preferred Packaging Solutions will make sure to connect you with the IT team. Thank you all so much. At 3 o'clock, we fit in a lot of content in this past hour. So thank you so much to our presenters, IBT Online, and to our participants for joining us. Thank you so much, and look forward to working with you in a more of a variety of throughout the next year. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, bye.